The first thing Henry heard that morning wasn't birdsong or the hum of his old fridge. It was glass, sharp, splintering, unmistakable, shattering onto his kitchen floor. He didn't even get out of bed. At 93, you learn to pause before moving too fast. His right knee had been bad since Korea, and his back locked up whenever he turned too quickly. But this wasn't the usual creak of his little California bungalow settling. This was someone inside. "Back door," he muttered, breath shallow. "They broke the damn window." Henry reached beneath the bed and pulled out a wooden cane, the one with his initials carved into it, HWD, from the VFW hall down in Riverside. He'd thought about keeping a bat or a gun, but he was too tired for that. Too tired of the threats, the spray paint, the fear. He stepped into the hallway, hand trembling against the wall for balance. There were voices now, Spanish, young, angry voices. One of them kicked over a chair. "Viejo's not even up," said a voice, thick with laughter. They didn't know he was awake, or maybe they didn't care. Either way, they were back, for the third time in 2 weeks. It had started with a knock, 3 kids in black hoodies asking for Luis. When Henry said no one by that name lived here, they stared him down like he was lying. 3 days later, someone smashed his mailbox. Then the garage light. Then the back window. Now they were inside. He reached the kitchen and froze. 2 boys, maybe late teens, stood near the fridge. One had a knife. Not big, but the kind you don't want near your ribs. The other was laughing as he pulled open cabinets, dumping dishes onto the floor like they were junk. "Who's Luis?" Henry said, his voice dry but firm. They turned, surprised. The boy with the knife stepped forward. "You got no business asking questions." Henry gripped his cane tighter. "This is my house." "You're trespassing. You shouldn't be here, Viejo. You think this house is yours, but it ain't, not anymore." The other one looked nervous now. "Let's just go. He's not Luis." The one with the knife didn't move. "This ain't over." And then, like God himself said, "Enough." The landline rang, loud, clear, like a forgotten war trumpet in the silence. It startled them. Henry moved quickly, faster than they expected. He grabbed the cordless phone from the wall and answered. "Hello?" A pause, then a voice. "Mr. Dalton, this is Agent Ruiz with the Bureau. We trace the calls. We know what's happening." Henry's eyes locked on the boy with the knife, who suddenly looked less sure of himself. "I'm here," Henry said quietly. "I've been waiting." By the time the police got there, the boys were long gone. Henry sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug. The window behind him had been boarded up last week, but the back door was wide open now, swinging slightly in the wind. Sunlight spilled across the floor, catching glints of broken ceramic and footprints smeared in dirt. Agent Ruiz's voice still echoed in his mind. "We traced the calls. We know what's happening." They hadn't explained much, just that someone was using Henry's address for something illegal, something serious enough to warrant surveillance. But that still didn't answer the question Henry had been asking himself for days. Who the hell is Luis? It was the 4th time someone had come looking for him. The first 2 were teenagers. The third was a man, mid-30s, tattoos up both arms, neck ink crawling into his jawline. He hadn't stepped inside, just stood at the curb for almost 15 minutes, staring at the house. Then he spat, turned, and vanished. Henry had lived on that street for 46 years. He'd put in the oak trees himself. He remembered when the neighborhood was full of young families, not flipped rentals and absentee landlords. People used to wave. Now everyone looked down. He pushed himself up from the table, bones protesting. Every step took effort, but he refused to act like a victim, not in his own home. He shuffled toward the living room and opened the drawer of a small desk beneath an old wall map of California. Inside were a few dusty folders, VA paperwork, an expired passport, and a sheet of legal notepaper with a list of calls, times, dates, area codes. He'd written them all down, blocked numbers, strange voicemails. Some were just silence, others whispered threats. He picked up the receiver and dialed the last missed call. It rang once, then cut to a static-filled line. A woman's voice came through. "Luis, You were supposed to call me back." Henry's blood turned cold. "I'm not Luis," he said, voice hoarse. "You have the wrong number. Who is this?" A pause, then a chuckle. "Oh, you poor thing," she said. "He's using your address again, isn't he?" Henry gripped the phone tighter. "Who is he? What's he doing?" The line went dead. He stared at the receiver in his hand, heart pounding. He didn't know much about tech, but he knew enough to realize someone had rerouted things, phone numbers, addresses, maybe even records. Someone was using his identity, or piggybacking on it, and that someone had clearly pissed off the wrong people. His mind drifted back to Korea, to the dead of winter, to the sound of incoming mortars and boots crunching snow. He'd made it through that war. Now another one had come to his front door. 2 days passed, no calls, no kids, just quiet. Henry didn't trust it. The window was still broken, but he left it that way. Let them see he wasn't afraid. He sat by it sometimes, book in hand, waiting like an old sentry. But his thoughts kept circling the same drain. Who was Luis, and why did he bring this mess to Henry's door? On Friday morning, a black Chevy Tahoe pulled up across the street. Tinted windows, no plates. The kind of vehicle Henry would have ignored 10 years ago. Now he watched like it was a bomb on 4 wheels. The engine idled for almost 20 minutes. Then, without warning, the passenger side door opened. A man stepped out, tall, well-dressed, hair slicked back like some movie villain. But it wasn't the man that made Henry sit forward. It was what he was carrying. A single white envelope. The man didn't walk up. He stood at the curb, staring at the house like it owed him something. Then slowly he crossed the street. Henry met him at the front door, not bothering to hide the small kitchen knife in his pocket. "You Henry Dalton?" the man asked, accent neutral but voice too smooth. "Depends who's asking." The man held up the envelope. "I don't want trouble. Just passing a message." Henry didn't reach for it. "From who?" "Luis." There it was again, that damn name. "He says he's sorry," the man continued. "Said you'd understand. Said you used to fight too. That you'd respect why he had to do what he did." Henry's fingers twitched against the handle of the knife. What exactly did he do? The man shrugged. "I don't ask questions I don't want the answers to." He placed the envelope carefully on the welcome mat, as if it were fragile. Then he turned and left. The Tahoe disappeared down the street like it had never been there. Henry waited a full minute before picking up the envelope. It was heavier than it looked. Inside was a photograph, black and white, blurry. 2 young men, arms slung around each other's shoulders. One of them had a cigarette in his mouth and tattoos crawling out from his collar. The other, his face was turned, almost hidden, wore a worn army jacket. Folded inside the photo was a note, scribbled in hurried handwriting. "I used your address because I knew no one would question a veteran's home. They'd never think to look there. I'm sorry, but you were safer than I was. I had no choice. Ewell." Henry read it 3 times, each time slower than the last. Then he turned the photo over. A date, and 1 word. Brothers. That night, Henry couldn't sleep. He sat in his recliner, the envelope open beside him, the photo resting on his knee like a wound. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the dry palm fronds out front. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then stopped. Brothers? The word haunted him. He stared again at the photo. The faces were younger, maybe late teens or early 20s. The kid with the army jacket, something about the way he stood. Shoulders squared, feet planted, like he was ready for war. Henry knew that stance. He'd lived it. He got up and shuffled to the hallway closet. From a high shelf, he pulled down a shoebox covered in dust. Inside, old letters, dog tags, a faded bronze star, and a photograph, folded in 4, of a group of young soldiers outside a barracks in Busan, 1951. There he was, back row, second from the right, and beside him, he froze. It wasn't a perfect match, but the resemblance was strong enough to jolt something loose in his memory. The kid with the cigarette in the Cartel photo. He looked like Manny, Private Manuel Vargas. They'd shared bunks for 8 months during the war. Manny was 2 years younger, wild as hell, always gambling with the locals or sneaking out past curfew. But he had Henry's back more times than he could count. Manny had vanished after the ceasefire. No letters, no phone calls, nothing. Henry had always assumed he didn't make it home. But now, decades later, this photo lands on his porch with a note signed L. Could Luis be Manny's son? The doorbell rang, sharp and unexpected. Henry jolted. He checked the clock. 2:13 a.m. No one decent rang a doorbell at this hour. He turned off the lamp, moved slowly to the front door, and peeked through the narrow window. A young man stood on the porch, late 20s, thin, nervous, hoodie pulled tight over his head. He wasn't holding anything. No bag, no weapon. Just standing there like someone with nowhere else to go. Henry opened the door but kept the chain on. "Who are you?" The young man didn't flinch. "My name's Luis." Henry's breath caught. Luis glanced over his shoulder, then back at Henry. "They're going to kill me. I didn't know they'd come to your house. I swear to God I didn't know." Henry stared at him, years of instinct kicking in. This wasn't a killer. This was a scared kid with ghosts chasing him. "You're Manny's boy?" Luis nodded, eyes glassy. "I'm the only one left." Henry looked down at the envelope again. The photo, the word that had started all this. Brothers. And somehow, through blood or fate, that brotherhood hadn't ended in Korea. It had just been passed on. Luis stood in the doorway like a man teetering between two cliffs. Behind him, a life soaked in danger. Ahead, only the unknown. Henry unlatched the chain without a word and stepped aside, his instincts guiding him more than logic. Luis entered slowly, glancing around the dimly lit house like it was a museum he didn't belong in. "I shouldn't have come," he muttered, hoodie still pulled over his head. "But I didn't know where else to go." Henry shut the door and locked it. "You picked my house for a reason," he said quietly. "Tell me why." Luis sank onto the couch, elbows on his knees, hands shaking. "I found my dad's things a few months ago, stuff from the war. Photos, letters, a journal. He talked about you, HD, the one I owe my life to. Said if anything ever went bad, I should go where the good men were." Henry sat across from him. "Manny didn't owe me anything." Luis looked up. "He said you dragged him out of a minefield. Said he watched you carry him with a bullet in your leg." "That's not nothing." Henry blinked. The memory came rushing back. The screams, the blood, the snow thick as cotton around their boots. "I thought he died after the war." Luis shook his head. "He made it home. Barely. But he got caught up in things. Debts. Wrong people. He never really left the battlefield, you know." Henry nodded slowly. He did know. "And now those same people are after you?" he asked. Luis hesitated. "Not the same, worse. I tried to pay them off. Moved product I shouldn't have. Got out, or thought I did. But they found me. I needed to disappear. Used your address to throw them off." "Why mine?" "Because no one looks twice at a veteran living alone in a quiet neighborhood." Henry stared at him. "You put a target on me." Luis nodded, ashamed. "I thought I could fix it before it got this far. I didn't think they'd come after you. I'm sorry." Silence filled the room, heavy and brittle. Henry stood and walked to the window. Outside, the street lay quiet, washed in orange streetlight. But he knew peace was a mirage. "You're not safe here," he said finally. "And neither am I." Luis looked up. "I'll leave." "No," Henry said, voice firm. "We're not running." He picked up the phone and dialed the bureau's number Agent Ruiz had left, a secure line. When the voice answered, Henry spoke clearly. "You said you traced the calls. You said you knew what was happening." A pause, then, "Yes, Mr. Dalton, yes." "Are you ready to talk?" Henry looked back at Luis, his best friend's son, scared and alone, and nodded. "I'm ready, but I want protection for the boy." They came at dawn. Henry had barely slept. Luis was on the floor in the den, curled beneath an old army blanket, one Henry had kept since '53. The boy hadn't said much after the call. He just nodded and closed his eyes like someone finally allowed to exhale, but Henry couldn't rest. The bureau had said someone would be by first light. Instead, Headlights flared outside at 5:17 a.m. Too early, too quiet, no sirens, no badge knock. Henry stepped to the window and carefully pulled back the curtain. A dark sedan, 2 men. One stayed behind the wheel. The other approached the house, something bulky beneath his coat. "Luis," Henry whispered, "get up." Luis shot awake, instincts honed from too many nights running. He bolted upright, eyes wide. "Go to the kitchen, back door, quiet." Luis obeyed without question. Henry reached into the drawer below the hallway phone, the one marked miscellaneous, and pulled out the small revolver he hadn't touched in over 20 years. 6 rounds, only one left, but one was enough. He opened the door before the man could knock. "Morning," Henry said, calm as ever. The man was in his 30s, clean-cut, no tattoos, not cartel, not local cops either. He flashed a badge, but too quickly. "Mr. Dalton, we need to speak with you, urgent matter." Henry's eyes narrowed. "Say Agent Ruiz's first name." The man blinked. "Excuse me?" "His first name. Go ahead." The man shifted slightly. "Look, sir." Henry slammed the door. Seconds later, the man kicked it in. Wood splintered. The frame cracked. Henry stumbled back, raised the revolver. "Don't move," he shouted. The man froze, gun now drawn but not aimed. "Don't be stupid, old man." "I've been stupid. I let your kind in once. That was enough." Luis appeared behind the intruder, silent as a shadow, holding a metal curtain rod like a club. Henry didn't look at him, he just said, "Now." Luis swung. The man crumpled. The driver outside started to get out of the sedan, but before he could shut the door, 2 black SUVs screeched to a stop at either end of the street. Doors burst open, tactical vests, rifles raised. "FBI, on the ground, now!" Henry dropped the revolver. Luis raised his hands. Within seconds, the fake agents were cuffed, guns kicked away, the front yard crawling with movement. Agent Ruiz approached Henry, breath visible in the cool morning air. "You okay, sir?" Henry looked at him, worn but steady. "Not sure what okay means anymore," he said. "But we're still breathing." Ruiz nodded. "That man inside, he's not just cartel. He's ex-DEA, dirty. The house was being watched because your address popped on multiple sealed warrants. We think Luis triggered the connection, but it was your name that protected him." Henry turned to Luis. "You hear that? You made it home." Luis didn't speak. He just nodded, eyes brimming with something Henry hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. 3 weeks later, the neighborhood was quiet again. The broken glass had been replaced, the dented door repaired. The FBI had set up protection in exchange for Henry's full cooperation and testimony. His name had been unknowingly used in a shell web of addresses tied to cartel trafficking routes, slipped through by corrupt agents like the one who kicked down his door. But now the storm had passed. Luis stood in the driveway, a man transformed, hair trimmed, hoodie gone. He wore a collared shirt Henry had insisted he borrow, one of the few things Henry still pressed himself every Sunday. The kid looked uncomfortable in it, but somehow older. Henry stepped out onto the porch, lowering himself slowly into the chair by the railing. "You're early," he said. Luis smiled, adjusting the shirt collar. "Bus gets here in an hour." "I didn't want to leave without saying goodbye." "You're not leaving," Henry replied, sipping his coffee. "You're just going somewhere you were always meant to be." Luis nodded, swallowing hard. "Witness relocation, new ID, new name. They said I could pick it." Henry raised an eyebrow. "That's so?" Luis hesitated. "I was thinking, Dalton." Henry paused mid-sip. "I mean," Luis stammered, "not to replace your son or anything, just maybe carry something forward." Henry didn't answer right away. He stared out at the street. Same cracked pavement he'd walked for 40 years, same mailbox he'd fixed too many times. Then he looked at the young man beside him, Manny's eyes, his quiet defiance. "You carry that name," Henry said finally. "You carry everything with it. Discipline, decency, and a hell of a lot of stubbornness." "I know." "And?" Luis straightened his back. "I'm ready." Henry smiled. Just a little. You'll make mistakes, he added. You'll get knocked down, but you stand back up. And that's what makes you a Dalton. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind of quiet two men only share when something important has already been said. When the bus pulled up at the corner, Luis stood. He extended his hand, but Henry waved it off. No handshake, he said, pushing himself up with effort. Come here. He pulled Luis into a hug, brief and firm, the kind only old soldiers know how to give. Tell him you're from Riverside, Henry said into his ear. Say your old man taught you how to fix cars and mind your damn manners. Luis laughed softly. I will. He turned and walked toward the bus, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Before he climbed aboard, he looked back. Henry raised his coffee mug like a salute, and Luis nodded once, climbed in and disappeared down the road. Henry sat back down. Same porch, same sun. But something had changed. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't waiting for trouble. He was just remembering what it felt like to protect something that mattered.